All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So I will begin by passing it to Amanda Lugg, Executive Director of African Services Committee.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and a very happy Wednesday to everybody. My name's Amanda Lugg, and I'm the Executive Director of African Services Committee. African Services Committee, just very briefly, we were founded in 1981. We're a multi-service human rights agency based in West Harlem, dedicated to improving the health and self-sufficiency of recent immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers from across the African diaspora. Those who have been affected by war, poverty, global health disparities, political oppression, and social persecution based on gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and HIV status. To this day, we maintain a deep-rooted health and community focus, providing health, housing, legal, educational, and self-sufficiency services to over 3,000 unique clients each year, reaching an additional 6,000 folks, my apologies, through outreach and education. So clearly, we are thrilled to be a part of this conversation today, as well as to be a member of CUNY SPH's nascent community advisory board, where 10 organizations from across New York State are helping CUNY SPH to shape a new migrant health resource hub, which you will certainly be hearing more about later. I would also like to say that CUNY SPH, like everyone on this call, I'm quite sure, is heavily invested in the safe and humane accommodation of the thousands of migrants who've been arriving in New York State over the past few months and still come today. We're thrilled to be able to speak, have a panel with the co-executive director from Make the Road, as well as our own Commissioner of Immigrant Affairs from City Council. We would like to start, though, by informing everyone around the Spanish translation services that we have this morning. And for that, I will just hand it off shortly to Luis and Maria to explain that process.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Sigourney, and we're going to have live interpretation to Spanish and English. So if you're not fully bilingual in Spanish, and these instructions are also for the presenters, so please make sure to follow them. If you're not fully bilingual in Spanish, because people may be asking questions in Spanish, so we don't have to repeat the question, make sure to access interpretation. If you're on a computer, you will see an icon that looks like a globe. So find that globe at the bottom of your screens where you have the toolbar, and then press that globe and then choose English. If you are on a cell phone or tablet, you're not going to see that globe. So find the 3 little dots at the bottom right corner of your cell phones or tablets where it says more. And then you'll see a menu. You can go up and down that menu with your finger until you find the option language interpretation, and then choose English and press done to save your preferences. I'm going to be repeating these exact same instructions in Spanish now. Buenos días, mi nombre es María Sigourney, estoy acá con Luis, vamos a ser los intérpretes del día de hoy, vamos a tener interpretación al inglés y español simultánea. Por favor, si no son completamente bilingües en inglés y en español, les pedimos por favor que accesen la herramienta de interpretación. Si están en una computadora, van a ver un globo en la parte de abajo de sus pantallas donde dice Interpretation. Presionen ahí y luego escojan español. Si están en un teléfono celular, no van a ver el globo, sino que busquen los 3 puntos en la esquina inferior derecha de sus pantallas donde dice More o Más, y van a ver un menú. Pueden subir y bajar en ese menú hasta que encuentren la opción que se llama Language Interpretation o interpretación de idiomas, y luego van a escoger la opción que se llama Español y presionen donde dice Done o finalizar o finalizado para que se guarden sus preferencias. Gracias.
Thank you, Maria. Well, let's get started. Which I'm afraid I have to begin with an apology. But due to the ongoing budget negotiations, unfortunately, no one from Albany was able to be with us this morning. However, all is not lost. And we're thrilled that Kathleen Cravero will be speaking with us. Kathleen is a distinguished lecturer at the CUNY Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy and a director of the CUNY Center for Immigrant, Refugee and Migrant Health. Before joining CUNY, Kathleen spent 25 years working on migrant health and development issues both with the United Nations and with global philanthropic organizations. So Kathleen, welcome.
Thank you very much, Amanda. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and thank everyone for joining us. As Amanda explained, we couldn't know when we planned this that it was going to come on the exact lead-up week and day that the budget would be considered in Albany. So we haven't been able to get an in-person representative, but certainly we will be able to arrange that at a future convening. But instead, I'm going to take a few minutes just to set the scene and give some perspectives from New York State and set the scene for what Commissioner Castro and Theo Oshiro will say later on in this meeting. And I'm going to talk about the New York State approach and policies to immigrants and asylum seekers in 3 categories: the numbers, the money, and the policies. So let's first take a look at the numbers. In 2021, there were 4.2 million immigrants or foreign-born individuals in New York State. This is about 22% of the population of the state, which is about the same percentage that we had in 2010. And the fact is that the absolute number of immigrants or foreign-born individuals in New York State is plateauing. And as we'll see in a minute or two, there's actually more foreign-born individuals leaving New York State than arriving in New York State. So you can see here just how the numbers of foreign-born individuals have plateaued, up in the 50s, down in the 70s, and then up to 4.42 million, where it has been for the last several years. And this plateauing of the absolute number of immigrants actually mirrors a plateauing in the number of people in New York State, because from 2010 to 2021, overall, the population of New York State has stayed about the same. And most of the growth in the population of New York State since 1980 can be attributed to individuals born outside the United States moving to New York State. The other point I want to make is that New York State, the overall population of New York State is growing older. In 2010, the median age was 41. In 2021, it is 44. And this mirrors a national trend of the population of the United States growing older. But let me focus on 3 demographic events that are actually shaping immigration across New York State today. So one is that fewer foreign-born individuals are entering the state each year from outside the United States. In 2021, about 100,000 new residents not born in the US moved to New York State, and this compares to 130,000 in 2016. Now, what this graph shows is that the second trend, which is that twice as many people are leaving New York State to move to other states than are actually moving into New York State from other states. So you can see in 2021, 115,000 foreign-born individuals left New York State to move to other states in the US, and only 46,000 left other states in the US to move to New York. Now, when surveys have been done on the people leaving, about 40 to 50% of them cite housing issues as a reason they were leaving New York State, that they could get better, more reliable, more stable housing and have more opportunities in a different state. The third event the third trend I want to emphasize is that just like the overall population in New York State, the immigrant population in New York State is also aging. So it's about 51 years in 2000, beginning of 2022, and that's 4 years older than it was in 2010. This means that a greater number of the foreign-born individuals in New York State are approaching or have reached retirement. And it explains why over the past 7 years, since 2015, we've actually lost 100,000 foreign-born. Our immigrant labor force has been reduced by 100,000. It also signals a need for newer immigrants to come. Newer immigrants are usually younger and at their beginning of their careers rather than at the end. Now, some parts of New York State have kind of bucked this trend and are having a different experience. Two that I'll just use as an example are Buffalo and the capital region of the states. Buffalo has actually over the last 5 years has had an increase in population, which is the first that it had in 7 decades, and a growth spurt because of the large numbers of immigrants that have moved to that area of the state. Similar thing is happening in the capital region. So I guess what these numbers tell us is that, we speak mostly about migration as being a crisis. And certainly having large flows of people move into a place is a crisis if you're not prepared and you don't have the resources to help them integrate, et cetera. But the point is that our own governor, in her campaign and since she's taken office, has made it clear that the continued growth of the New York State economy depends on getting more people and more younger people into the state. And if this isn't going to happen by native-born Americans moving to New York State, which is very unlikely, then we really do depend as a state on maintaining robust immigration. So that's just some demographic trends about migration in New York State that we should keep in mind as we move forward in the meeting. The second, if that's the situation, what about the money? And as we said, the New York State budget, the new budget, is being considered by the state legislature as we speak right now. I have gone through that budget. It's actually very hard to determine how much of the overall state budget is being spent on services and welcoming asylum seekers and migrants into the state. What is clear is that there's $1 billion contained in the budget in support of New York City's efforts on behalf of migrants and asylum seekers. And I'm sure the commissioner and Theo will talk a little bit more about that. $1 billion by anybody's standards is a lot of money, but I do want to emphasize that advocates are pointing out that $1 billion out of a total budget of $227 billion is less than 0.4% of the overall budget. So we have to keep, the 1 billion in perspective to what the whole budget is without, while still recognize that $1 billion is $1 billion. But this $1 billion, let me show you what that includes. I'll ask Ansley just to put up a quick slide because that's a lot of numbers and I'm sure we'll all get lost in it. 767 million is for housing, 162 million for National Guard operations. You might say, well, what are those? It's deploying National Guard at Port Authority and other ports of entry to support migrants as they enter the city. 137 million is for healthcare, 30 million for resettlement, 10 million for legal services, and 6 million allocated for the shelter at the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal, which we know there's a lot of controversy around, but that still is in the budget at this point. So if we take down that slide, just to emphasize that a large portion of this billion, and I'm sure, again, Commissioner Castro might mention this, but a large portion of this, the mayor is saying needs to be used to reimburse New York City for expenses it's already incurred. About 56,000 refugees have come to New York City between July 2022 and March 2023. The city has expended well over 800 million on these migrants and refugees, is now experiencing a budget deficit as a result, and is saying that that 1 billion, it was expecting more because that 1 billion needs to be paying back some of what's already been spent. The 137 million for healthcare is devoted to the New York City CARES initiative. That is the largest program in the country that offers low-cost and no-cost health services to citizens of the state who have no access to health insurance, regardless of their immigration status. So that program will get 137 million. Now, advocates, and again, I'm sure that Theo might have something to say about this, that are not completely happy with this 1 billion because it doesn't include many things that advocates were hoping it would include. It doesn't include unemployment insurance for undocumented workers. It doesn't include statewide legal representation and deportation hearings. It doesn't include expanded mental health services. It doesn't at this point include migrants in the New York State essential insurance plans, although Make the Road and other organizations are pushing back hard on that. It doesn't include money to implement the decision that was made last year to extend Medicaid to maternal and child health services and to people over 65. And one of the things that advocates are quite upset about is that it will require, unless there's more money found, there will be deep cuts in adult learning programs, including English as a second language. So many of the courses that are being offered by public libraries across New York City, Queens Public Library, as well as others, will be cut, and learning, having services for English as a second language, learning English, of course, is an important part of integrating for migrants. So these are just some aspects of the budget. I'm sure they'll be talked about in greater length at different points. So that we talked about the numbers, we talked about the money. Let's just talk a little bit about the policies. And I'm just going to mention 3 policies of New York State that have been passed or about to be passed that will have a significant impact for migrants and asylum seekers. The first is Bill A6328A, which is an amendment to Executive Order 292. And what it does is add citizenship and migration status to the list of things that you cannot use to discriminate against people in employment. So Executive Law 292 says that you can't discriminate on the basis of gender or religion or disability status. And this bill, which was passed by the New York State Legislature in December 2022, adds citizenship and immigration status to that if the person has the legal right to work in the US, which many asylum seekers do. I don't know if Commissioner Castro will talk about this specific point, but in the mayor's plan for asylum seekers, he specifically asks that asylum seekers be able to work after 6 months rather than the now, I think it's 18 months across New York State, in order to help people integrate faster if they can. So this bill will be supportive of that. Another bill that's important is the New York for All Act. It has a special number in the legislature. It is currently in front of the legislature, and it prohibits state and local officials from enforcing immigration laws. So it prohibits them from passing people's information to ICE or the Customs and Border Control. It prohibits federal officials from going onto private property without appropriate warrants, and it stops state and local officials from feeling that they have to, or even allowing them to funnel people to ICE or other federal authorities. So that's New York for Law bill. The third one I want to talk about are the green light laws. Now, the green light law is quite exciting. It was passed again, I think last year or to late 2021, and it allows all New Yorkers to earn a standard driver's license. As you know, we have three different levels of licenses. You have a enhanced license, a real ID, and a standard driver's license. So now any New Yorker, regardless of immigration status, can get a standard driver's license. You don't have to have a social security number. There's a range of documentation that can be used for these licenses. People are not asked about their status when they go to get one, and privacy protections are strongly in place. So it allows asylum seekers and migrants to be able to drive to work, to drive their kids to school, to take care of their needs in a way that's, much more efficient for them, especially migrants and asylum seekers living outside New York City. This might not be such a big boon to people living in New York because there's public transportation, but as we all know, in rural parts of the state, if you don't have a car or don't have access to a car or can't drive one, then you're severely limited in what services you can access. So this is really important. And just the status of the green light laws, it's worth talking about. The green light laws were passed in 2020. During which many of the DMVs were closed. So the Department of Motor Vehicles were closed, so people couldn't actually take advantage of the law. In addition, because DMV employees were not at their offices, they weren't well briefed about it. Now, still in 2022, it's not easy to access. Well, the implementation of the green light laws is a little bit uneven because there's a lot of migrants don't know that they exist, for one thing. Secondly, there are DMV officials who don't understand what their obligations are. They're still asking for social security numbers, or they're still asking for a more limited range of documentation and therefore denying standard driver's license. So this has to be worked out, but the law is there. The procedures are clear, and we just have to get implementation going more generally. And the last thing I'll just talk about is the role of federally qualified health centers, because we get a lot of questions about this. Federally qualified health centers are health centers that are subsidized with HRSA money. They offer, they're community-based, and they offer low cost or no cost healthcare in underserved areas. There are about 70 federally qualified health centers across New York State. They are, at this point, the best option for receiving preventative and primary health care for many, many migrants and asylum seekers across the state. The problem is that they offer only preventative and primary care. There is a sliding scale, so not all services are free. and they are chronically underfunded. So there's a lot of issues with them, but they have a lot of bipartisan support in the state legislature. So I think most migrant health advocates still see them as a real promising avenue to ensure that asylum seekers and foreign-born individuals have access to primary health care. And for example, the New York State Public Health Corps, which is placing hundreds of volunteer corps across the state, is working very closely to make sure that those public health corps, the new public health corps, is placed within federally qualified health centers. So that's just to give you an idea about the federally qualified health centers and the role they play in the state in providing migrant health. And I'll just end with a quote from our governor. In February this year, she was opening a statewide immigration employment program, and she said, and I quote, "For generations, the hard work and determination of immigrants who have come to New York to build a better life have shaped the state into what it is today." So these are the words of our governor, and I think there's great expectations that those words and that sentiment will be translated sooner rather than later into appropriate numbers, adequate money, and positive policies. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. So yeah, fingers crossed on that one for sure. Ansi, can you tell me if our next speaker is ready? And in the meantime, more than happy to take any questions or comments.
I'll start by saying there is one question in the chat from Salvador with Family of Woodstock. He's asked if there is any money allocated for the rest of the state within the budget.
Yes, thank you for that question, Salvador. I was saying at the beginning that the state says that there is, but that money is integrated into various sections of the budget. So in the health section, there is some money allocated for migrants, in the education lines of the budget. And to be honest, it's very hard to add it up and see what it comes up to. So we will certainly follow up with the state officials once the budget is passed and try to get a clearer line on that.
Okay. Any more questions, Nancy?
I see one more. Why is Buffalo a draw to migrants?
That's a good
Buffalo. Let's hear it for Buffalo.
You know, it's a good question. I think that Buffalo offered some innovative employment options for immigrants. It also got an influx of Asian immigrants. And I think once a certain group of Asians got there, you know, others joined them. And part of it is being driven by this new group of Asian immigrants that have come to Buffalo in the last 5 years. And I think they just, I'm not sure what initially attracted them, but Buffalo has done a good job of integrating these immigrants, giving them business opportunities, education opportunities, and the area has really flourished as a result.
Yeah, we actually have a similar situation up in the north of the state in Rochester, New York. We a growing African immigrant community up there. We actually had a couple of former staff members from like 20 years ago, African Services, moved up there. And yeah, affordability seems to be the word that's used. But yeah, it's interesting. It's always interesting. Any more questions, or should we move on?
Let's see, there is one additional one that I'll mention. Is there an expectation that additional federal funding will be made available to support the influx we're seeing in New York City? So not just coming from the state budget, but also from the federal budget.
Certainly there is strong advocacy on the part of the mayor and the governor wanting to see the line that's used is that it should be a third in supporting and responding and providing financial resources for us migrants and asylum seekers. So they're looking for, at least a third of the overall funding to come from the federal government. Neither the governor or the mayor is satisfied with what the federal government has provided thus far. So I'm sure that there will be pressure on the federal government to provide more.
Okay. All right.
There's a couple more questions, but I think I'll save them for the Q&A section.
Okay. All right. So 12:04. Theo, are you okay if we move straight to you?
Of course, yes.
Fabulous. Thank you. So Theo Oshiro is one of the 3 co-executive directors of Make the Road New York. Theo oversees the services departments at Make the Road, including adult literacy and health advocacy, and serves as their lead health policy expert. A Peruvian immigrant raised in Queens, Theo has been recognized several times for his contributions to immigrant communities, winning the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest Felix A. Fishman Award. Theo was appointed by Mayor de Blasio and Governor Cuomo to serve on city and state level policy task force focused on immigrant health and health disparities. And we're thrilled to welcome him here today. Thanks, Theo.
So much, Amanda, and thank you to CUNY for having me here today on this very important event and Zoom to talk about a very crucial issue, which, I think as has been stated, right, we are of course experiencing higher than normal numbers of asylum seekers here in the city. But I think that, it is, I think, part of the tradition of our state and our city that is used to seeing, migrants really make up the fabric of what this city is, right? And so I think that we have, of course, a challenge ahead of us. And I think that we do best when we're all in collaboration with each other. And so, I think that what we've aimed to do here at my organization, which is called Make the Road New York, is really serve as a crucial link, right, between immigrant communities, whether they've, been here for many years or have just arrived, like these asylum seeker, individuals and families, to make sure that they have a trusted resource, right? We know that as much work as the city does and our state does to set up infrastructure to welcome migrants, we know that community-based organizations are actually, an even more of a trusted resource with deep roots in communities where immigrants are going. We all know it can be scary, right, to arrive in a new place and go into, either a city agency or a city facility to seek help, right? So I think that as an organization at Make the Road, we really serve as a trusted resource that's been in the community for many, many years. Our organization has been around for a little bit over 25 years now, providing crucial services and doing community organizing. And I want to talk a little bit about the work that we do. We have been collaborating with the city, and I know that Commissioner Castro will be talking about the blueprint and the city's planning. But as an organization, right, we're in 5 places, 3 in New York City. And we provide wraparound support, right? Whether it's adult literacy, we have a pretty robust adult literacy program where we're teaching people English or civics, right, to take the citizenship exam. We do legal services, which is actually one of the biggest units in our organization, departments in our organization, because we know that legal services are crucial for people being able to seek justice, whether it's in immigration courts or other courts. And folks, can't afford attorneys, right? I think the asylum seekers that we're seeing are arriving without any money in their pockets. We want to make sure that they are able to navigate the courts successfully. We know that immigration, the legal landscape within immigration is highly complex. We know that many of the folks, if not the great majority, don't speak English, have language access issues in accessing our courts. And so we want to make sure that there are the resources available there. And then health access services, right? We know that a lot of the folks that are arriving have a lot of health needs, either because they weren't able to access health services in their countries of origin, or because it really is a really challenging migration route from their countries of origin to New York City. And so what we're seeing is many individuals, many families in need of health support. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. But I know that many of us are very excited, right, to hear about the blueprint that the city has created and the ways in which they're collaborating with community-based organizations like ours. We're very happy to have worked very closely with Commissioner Castro since the very beginning of when we started seeing asylum seekers at the Port Authority bus terminal. So I want to turn it over to him, actually, because I know he's on now to maybe guide us through a little bit more of the blueprints and the city's efforts. And then I would love to weigh in after that, just so that we can, make sure to cover everything in the limited amount of time that we have. So Manny, it's great to see you. I'll turn it over to you.
Good to see you, Theo, and good to see everyone on this call. Apologies for being a little late. At Port Authority, some of you may have heard, we are receiving buses from the border today. Governor Abbott decided to restart the program, his program to send buses to New York City, but also other cities across the country. And so there's a lot of interest in that. And so I'm here doing some press work and most importantly, welcoming asylum seekers as they arrive. Just like in previous times, we're seeing quite a lot of families and small children arrive. I welcomed the first bus had something like 40 people, and about 2/3 of them were children. And again, Governor Abbott is not coordinating with us, so it's hard for us to know exactly who is arriving and what condition and even at what time. And so we spend quite a lot of time at Port Authority just tracking buses and collecting information and waiting for asylum seekers to arrive so we know how best to support them. And this has been ongoing, as Theo mentioned. Last year, in June, I think is when we started to see the largest number of buses arrive from the border, but it was really around this time last year that buses began to arrive in Washington, D.C., and people did not receive a lot of support there, so they began to make their way up to New York City, and so that's when we saw an uptick of asylum seekers in our system. Now, since then, we've done quite a lot here in city government to support asylum seekers, and it's been quite a massive operation. I think for a variety of reasons, we try and make sure that the privacy of asylum seekers and others are protected. So, when we open a hotel, when we turn it into a shelter, we don't announce it necessarily. We've opened a number of what we call CIRGHs, which are emergency response centers, which are really more of the immediate first stop for a lot of asylum seekers before they enter the sort of more traditional system. But it's been quite an undertaking in the last year, which is why we released this blueprint, which really looks to establish, kind of next steps in moving from an emergency crisis response to a steady state response. And again, these are all plans. It's hard to know when that actually can happen, moving from an emergency response to a steady state response, because the crisis is ongoing. And when I say crisis, I mean humanitarian crisis, in that, this is what people are experiencing themselves. They're having to cross a number of borders. Many are crossing the Darien jungle to get to the Mexican border, and then they're basically stuck there until their turn is up. A bunch of things have happened over the year that prevent a number of people from entering, but we're still seeing people entering, mostly families with children, and then they have nowhere else to go, and they're diverted often by the state government of Texas to New York City or other destinations. And so what people are people are incredibly confused. They often think the state government of Texas is working in partnership with the federal government or other localities to find this transportation and direct them to assistance, which is not the case. And so when they arrive in New York City, people need a lot of support and a lot of guidance, very basic information, and also just an understanding of what their legal situation looks like. And so they are certainly in a very, dire circumstances. We try and do our best to help as many people as possible, as they arrive. But so many people are arriving at once that we really rely on our partnership, as Theo mentioned, with nonprofit providers that are doing a lot of this work on the ground in communities where asylum seekers are being placed in shelters. And the blueprint also looks to lay out, how we will be working with or continuing to work with local nonprofit organizations, with places of worship and other partners, because what we haven't seen, at least in the last 100 years in New York City, the only thing in modern history we can compare this to is the about 3,000 unaccompanied minors that arrived in New York in 2017. But this is a large number of people arriving. And so we really need an all hands on deck approach to support people arriving. I won't go over the numbers because that is included in some of the updates that we've sent around, but over 120 hotels have been converted into shelters, where we provide not just emergency shelter, but other services to asylum seekers. Again, that's a really massive operation that most people don't get to see, which is why we're establishing this OASO office, the Office for Asylum Seeker Operations, which is really looks to centralize what is right now dispersed among several different agencies, including Health and Hospitals, Department of Homeless Services, of course, my office, but other offices as well. Because again, without much support from the federal government, we're going to have to figure out how to do this long term. Because as many of you know, for most people, this will take at least a year or two for them to be able to actually gain some type of work status and semblance of normality here in the United States, in New York City. We're looking to partner, of course, with state government agencies. We partner with them here at Port Authority with the National Guard, who's supporting our efforts here, but we're still seeing between 200 and 300 people per day. And with these new buses arriving, we could be seeing upwards of 800 to 1,000 people arrive a day. You know, when you have to consider that we're working with people, with human beings here, it is quite a challenge to be able to support everyone that's arriving, finding beds and just rooms for especially children and families is the most critical thing that we're having to figure out every day, because there's only so many hotels that we can lease and find space for people to stay. I think in the coming weeks and months, you'll see a few more things coming from us, including opening this 24/7 arrival center, which again looks to centralize a lot of our efforts, some of which are located right now at Port Authority and at a navigation center we opened with the Red Cross not too far from here. This 24/7 arrival center will look to centralize those things, but also make sure that people have the support, the ongoing support they need, and are not finding themselves lost throughout the city. And so you'll see that announcement very soon. We're also rolling out an effort to scale up our legal services through pro se clinics, again, leveraging nonprofit infrastructure. We fund a lot of the legal service providers in the city, but we've found that we need to start mobilizing volunteers, non-lawyers, folks that we can train that can support asylum seekers, at the very least understanding their basic process for seeking asylum. And at the same time, we're going to continue to press on the federal government to do more. We believe that the federal government can do some things such as TPS for Venezuelans, redesignating that cutoff date, and more TPS for other countries, Central Americans in particular, so that relief can come sooner and work permits are able to be processed a lot quicker for them. Ultimately, asylum seekers, I speak with them daily and often, they want to work, but right now, because they have no work permits and are not allowed to work legally, they depend on the informal economy and are feel stuck because they can't necessarily figure out how to find their own work in housing without the ability to actually work, and often work is very limited for them. So it's really a perfect storm in terms of how they're experiencing this crisis. And frankly, this is why you've seen many of them try and go to Canada, thinking that it would be easier for them to have access to work permits and in a more, let's say, open, welcoming. We're trying our best, and we're looking to partner with many of you on this call. And I look forward to working closely. Lorena Lucero is on this call as well. I may need to jump off because we're waiting another bus to arrive. But thank you for putting this together. Oh, and also a big shout out to the Chancellor. I just met with him, CUNY Chancellor. He was very, very interested in working with us. We're speaking about a number of different partnerships with CUNY on this issue, and the Chancellor has just been tremendous and a huge supporter of our work. So shout out to him and everyone at CUNY. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Amanda, if you don't mind, I'd just like to thank the Commissioner for being with us, and to say that the Center for Immigrant, Refugee, and Global Health at CUNY is working very hard to see how we can support this process through student navigators and other ways. Just a couple of questions for the Commissioner while he can still be with us. One, there was one question from a participant about our all these kids that are coming on the bus, are they mostly accompanied or unaccompanied? And if they're unaccompanied, are there special programs being developed for them? And the second question was, in the budget, we just learned that there's $1 billion designated for New York City efforts in the state budget, and wanted to know if the commissioner could comment on, how that will be used to support the roadmap, and what the city is hoping to see in addition, or if this was what the city was hoping for, et cetera.
It looks like the commissioner just jumped off. Let me go ahead and make Lorena a panelist so that she can respond. Just one moment. All right, you should be ready to go.
Hi everybody, Lorena Lucero, Chief Policy Advisor at MOIA. I can start with the second question. So we have been working closely with the state to, again, given some of the priorities that were identified in the blueprint, comes to no surprise, issues like resettlement efforts, legal services. Two big examples are things that we're hoping to use some of the funding for. A lot of this, as you know, I think the budget was just finally announced this morning, so a lot of moving pieces, but big priority for us is figuring out pathways for folks to have legal services. So that's one. And then in regards to the number of people, there has been a small percentage of unaccompanied minors. We've been in the middle of deciphering that in. But for the majority, it's been a family and children. Like the commissioner mentioned just this morning, we received a bus from Texas with 22 kids, but they, and children like younger age, right? Like younger than 10 years old. So that's sort of where, some of the trends that we've been seeing. The majority family with children.
Good. Amanda, I'm wondering, maybe Theo, maybe you could come back in and respond to some of what the commissioner said, and then we can direct questions to Lorena and you afterwards.
Okay, sounds great. Hey everybody again, and hi Lorena, it's great to see you again. As I think a lot of what the commissioner was talking about resonated, with me and I think with the priorities of our organization. I think that what I was emphasizing earlier was really this collaboration with city government. And also, I know, part of what we're talking about is the state level, right? And what was included in the budget, what wasn't, and what kind of support can go towards services for migrants. That's something that, we participated in the budget advocacy as well. And there are some really clear measures that I think the state could do moving forward to ensure that not only recently arrived migrants, but the broader immigrant population can, so that they can achieve greater stability here in our state. One, key issue that we've been working on at the state level is called the Coverage for All legislation, which would actually provide health insurance coverage for the undocumented in the state of New York. It's worth noting that many asylum seekers are already eligible for health insurance, and it's been noted that, we have programs in the city to not only the FQHCs, but the health and hospitals facilities, New York City Care, right, and programs such as that provide lots of access to healthcare. But we know, right, that there are still people falling through the cracks. Immigrant populations in particular tend to be uninsured. And we know that, it's healthcare, is a right as we see it. And we want to make sure that our state steps up in this way, right? So it's a piece of legislation that was unfortunately not included in the budget. And there's actually 5 more weeks left in the legislative session outside of budget, right, to continue to push for these kinds of measures, and particularly with coverage for all, we believe does not have and we know it doesn't need to have a state price tag onto it, because there is a way for the state to access federal dollars, right? To this point of federal money coming to assist our state. This is obviously not, a check, to the city to provide all kinds of services, but really goes to the importance of health and the poor health outcomes that migrants often see because of lack of health insurance, and another way that the federal government could step in to assist the state. But the state does need to issue legislation to make this happen. So just wanted to put that, make sure everyone was aware of that piece of legislation. There's still a lot that we as an organization and we as a broader community who cares about these issues can do, to reach out in support of these kinds of measures. A lot of what Manny was talking about as far as the demographics of the population resonated. Definitely trend younger, either individuals or families. We are seeing increasingly children, right, arriving as well. Many are having trouble enrolling their children into schools. That there are, I think, gaps in some of the language access services or other ways of getting information to parents of young children on how to enroll their kids into school. Is it safe? What happens to their information, et cetera? So we're working on that front as well. I will say we're currently creating, and I think in the next week or so we'll be publishing a manual that's been created for this population, for asylum seeker populations, as kind of a welcoming document or kit or manual, right, that has information on various things, right? In Spanish, we currently have it. We may translate it into other languages, but how to access health resources, how to enroll your children into school, how to access food pantries and nutrition services, what your rights are in the workplace. We see that unfortunately, these communities, if they are able to find employment, are very quickly face wage theft in these places of employment, often in places in industries like construction or restaurant work. And that's a very kind of old story as well. Like we know that that's actually very true of the immigrant population, but even more so with this particularly vulnerable population who is often homeless and have no other options than to take jobs that are paying under the minimum wage. Totally on the kind of access to permanent jobs. Many do not have work authorization. And so it makes it hard to, be able to sustain oneself. And I talked about some of the health and legal challenges earlier. One thing I'll say, or on the service side, that Make the Road has been doing is we have actually created a new program to give free cell phones to the asylum seeker population. We've been at either the bus terminals or the intake centers that the city's created to provide these cell phones, because many people come without anything at all. And we find that this is a great way for not only a resource for them to call loved ones, et cetera, but if we want to be able to follow up with holistic services, like legal services, like English classes, like health services, we need to be able to get them back into our offices, our community centers, to enroll, to get the support, to keep in touch with their attorneys. So that's one key service that we've been doing. And then, making sure that at a policy level, we're continuing to push for our city and state to create and pass pro-immigrant policies. So I just wanted to run down, and I know that some of this was mentioned earlier, but we need to make sure that as a state, we're protecting immigrant New Yorkers against deportation. And so my organization has, been doing a lot of this work over the years on some of the kind of firewalls, if you will, between state government and ICE and immigration and customs enforcement. We believe that the city should strengthen even further its immigration detainer laws that were passed several years ago now, but there are some bills that, if passed, specifically one Intro 158 and 184 and 185, that would prevent even further a connection between ICE and law enforcement. And so that would include entities like the NYPD, the DOC, the Department of Probation, et cetera. Legal services are key, as the commissioner stated, right? We believe that our city should invest even more into legal services. We have a proposal of an extra $50 million to be invested legal service provision infrastructure. There are other kind of funding pots that we think need to be strengthened. The project called Knife Up for short, the New York Immigrant Family Unity Project, which has been a network of providers that provide legal counsel to vulnerable immigrant communities. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about as far as policy is that, we know and we've heard from the commissioner, right, that housing or lack of housing is a very big problem, right? Not only for our city as a whole, but particularly for this community. And so City FEPS, the City FHEPS program, is a voucher that helps New Yorkers move from homeless shelters to apartments, right? It's a more permanent housing. And that program currently exists, but is limited to a very small number of people. We believe that in order to help more people obtain stable housing, the city should improve this program, eliminating unnecessary rules, expand eligibility, and include families where everyone is undocumented. Currently, if anyone is undocumented in the household, they can't take advantage of this program. And so, that's an example, right, of measures that we believe are very much needed, right? We're in this continual process of refining and fine-tuning our approach as a city, as a state. And we think that program in particular can do a lot, in addition to some of the more immigration specific. Many people think immigration is a federal issue. Of course it is, and we need comprehensive immigration reform, but there's actually a lot that the city and state can do. The driver's license legislation was mentioned earlier. Of course, that was one of the key fights that we took part in. Yes, when it passed, but many years before, if folks remember, that was actually passed, more than a decade ago, and was then repealed here in the state, and we were able to win it again. So we know that the state can stand up for immigrant communities. We tend to do it more when we have kind of an administration at the federal level that's less favorable to immigrant communities. But we think and believe as an organization that this is something that states and cities should do all the time, right? Figuring out ways to make to welcome immigrant communities here in our state and city. And then finally, I just want to say, we at Make the Road, we do have a city platform that perhaps if I send to our moderators, they can send out to all of you. We have a platform that we have released for our city that includes some of the measures that I've talked about today, but others as well. If anybody wants to get involved with our work, our organization, please feel free to reach out via our website or any of our social media handles. If you look up Make the Road, they'll come up. Because I think what we've learned over time is that we need more and more people, right, to be able to win the kind of things that we need in our city and our state. We do a lot of policy work and direct service work, but a lot of what we do is also advising governments on how to stand up programs that actually will work for communities. So we've worked a lot with, Moya and Lorena and the commissioner, but also at the state level to refine programs and make sure that they work, right? And that we're trying to achieve, getting closer to a vision that we have as a city and state that's a friend to immigrant communities. So I'll stop there and turn it, I guess, back over to Amanda.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, to me, Theo. So thank you very much. There's a couple of questions for you and one for Lorena. So maybe while you're addressing them, Lorena can be thinking of how she wants to respond. One is how can people access the manual you referred to is one question. Another question is how Make the Road feels about the current proposal of the New York for All Act, which is the one that would support the idea that there shouldn't be collaboration with federal authorities in terms of detaining or deporting migrants in New York State. And Lorena, for you, it's how the commissioner was talking about how, there is no collaboration between Texas and New York on these buses. A question would be, what's the cooperation like between New York City and other parts of the state in terms of migrants flowing through the state or orderly, safe, and humane reintegration in other parts of the state? So first to you, Theo, and then we'll move to Lorena.
Yes. So the New York for All Act is actually something that we do support. We have been working on these kinds of issues for many years. And, I know we were asking for things outside of the city as well. In Westchester, where we actually have a presence and membership, we were able to pass a local law to ensure that Westchester, so county entities, were not collaborating with ICE. So this just comes from the very basic thing that, if a county is running courts or running food service or a public benefit agency, that those places shouldn't be places where a migrant goes in and then gets detained and then deported, right? They're there seeking assistance, seeking help from their local government, and that kind of collaboration shouldn't happen and then result in bad things happening to, or deportation in particular happening to people. We know that often when people are deported back to countries of origin, that they're fleeing either for political persecution or various other reasons, that their lives actually are in danger there, right? And so we want to make sure that that collaboration is not happening. And so yes, we've supported not only at the kind of very local level, but at the New York City level, which also local, but much bigger than a particular county, and at the state level as well. Finally, on your other question around the brochure, the librito, the little book that we're creating for community members, that will be accessible on our website as soon as it's launched. We're just going through the final steps of completing that little book. And so I've put my, I think my website, our website is being put now in the chat. So folks can feel free to visit it. I believe it should be up in the next week or so, and printable, etc., if folks want to use it to provide to community members. And so again, it's a range of information in there that I think that we've identified just from conversations with asylum seekers on what information.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Lorena.
Yeah, I wanted to also comment on something that Theo said that really stood out, and just sort of so everybody has a sense of the work and like the all hands on deck approach that this response has really taken. To Theo's point, the administration, particularly in regards to school enrollment, the administration had announced, I think it's called Project Open Arms, of enrolling kids into school and having locations where people could go. The city can do and create programs, but if we don't have partners like Make the Road and others who are really out, supporting us by giving information to the community, by saying this is a safe way for you to enroll your children, the programs that we put together, might not work. So I mentioned that because it speaks truth to sort of like the partnership and the importance of that collaboration. I'll also mention that, Make the Road and a few other organizations are a part of this larger navigation center satellite sites that are CBOs that provide an array of support to recently arrived New Yorkers. That sort of was crucial, right? Again, to sort of get the word out there, to provide services in people's own languages, based in the borough. I'm going to throw up this number because I don't think it's been said before, but via our hub of the navigation center and satellite sites, we've served over 23,000 people across the 5 boroughs. And that's really, again, significant to the approach, to the work that a lot of the folks on the ground are doing. And then to answer the question, and again, I just want to uplift the work because Make the Road and other nonprofits who are a part of this are really doing the on the ground work and have been able to touch, a significant number of people that have recently arrived. In regards to the communication, so via the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, we are a part and a lead of a coalition called Cities for Action, which is a coalition of pro-immigrant cities. We have over 200 mayors and county executives who are part of this coalition, where we discuss some of the issues and trends that we're seeing, particularly with the busing. The commissioners mentioned this before, but at a point, there was no communication from the federal government. We were sort of piecemealing how many people are coming, where the bus is being sent to. And when there was no response from the federal government, this coalition of Cities for Action really sort of stepped in, where we learned more about, the trends that were happening, but also like what policy push can we make to the federal level? Like what advocacy can we continue to push as a coalition of cities? And that, that's sort of like nationwide. With the state, we have been having ongoing conversations, raising the same issues, concerns about debuffing any misinformation, making sure that people have a place to go when they do leave, questions about legal cases, and if they have to do something that's referred to as a change of venue in their legal case, that it's being done when they move. So open-ended questions like that, but also a more connection and communication with the state. I will mention that there has been some lack of movement from people from the city to the state because of a lack of work permit. We have been, working and sort of trying to triage if folks could work in farms and things like that. And we have ongoing discussions with the state in regards to where to best place people, but with actual, jobs and then a potential place to stay. So I hope that's helpful, but it really sort of talks about the communication that we've had, not only within the state, but within the country and other states, particularly when the federal government didn't do any of that coordination.
Thank you very much, Lorena. That is helpful. For Theo or you, there's a question about, is there partnering with financial institutions to ease the process for new immigrants to open accounts and start building credit? So I don't know if either of you are involved with programs like that or know what the state is.
Yeah, I mean, so I can take an initial stab at that. We do do a little bit of that work. We partner mostly with partner financial institutions locally, mostly credit unions that have served immigrant communities for a long time. And so we are making those connections. The city does have, and you know, Lorena can speak to this much better than I can, given that it originated at Moya, but the NYC ID program, which enables people to have access to, you know, government issued ID, which then facilitates opening bank accounts, because I know there's a very close collaboration there. So, but I don't know if you wanted to say anything more about that or anything else.
Yeah, thank you. And you were probably supporting at the very beginning of the idea of creating a municipal ID, which is historic, I think, first of its kind in the country. A municipal ID provides a form of identification. The majority of, and this is significant in many ways, but the majority of people that have been arriving to New York City come from Venezuela. Many of them come without passports, and figuring out and triaging how to get an ID when you don't have an embassy could be very difficult. So via the IDNYC program, we've been able, and it's one of them, it's the most popular program that like is being used right now by recent arrivals. At the navigation center that we have, again, this one-stop shop that's located in Hell's Kitchen, where we have several services on site, including IDNYC. It's the top one, top sort of a service that people use. With the card, there are some financial institutions that are connected to it, so people can open a bank account. It's sort of how people have been able to get around. So it's via that, but we also, I'm seeing the comment, no of Qualitas as well, and we'll take your email down, but that's great.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a last question, because I know we're running out of time, but for Lorena, is there a timeline for when the Office of Asylum Seeker Operations will be up and running?
TBD. We are working around the clock to get that up and running. Again, the office is sort of, it's gonna streamline a lot of the work that we are already doing. Offices like Moya, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, we've been sort of doing a lot, and the goal of the office is to really streamline the work. We are being told probably by the summer, if not before, maybe even prior to that. There's been a lot of moving pieces, but it's something that we've been, as a city, working on and getting something going. So I can say that we're in the middle of just figuring out logistics, but we're hoping that by or before the summer.
Okay, thank you very much. There is one other question about federally qualified health clinics. I did mention in my remarks on New York State that there are 70 across the state. They are a hugely important source of healthcare, especially preventative and primary healthcare to migrants across the state. I don't know, I'm assuming that the question says New York ? So I'm assuming that's a New York State question, but certainly they are. As I said, there's 70 across the state. So that is that. And I think now we're running, we're just about at time. So I did want to just say that I think this webinar, the meeting or the convening has happened at an incredible moment, in that the New York State budget is being approved as this meeting is taking place, and buses are arriving in Port Authority as the meeting is taking place. I think underlying that, the issues that have been raised here, the work of the organizations who are participants on this call, the work of organizations like African Services Committee, Make the Road, and certainly the Mayor's Office are just critical to moving from a crisis mentality to, as I said, what the governor said about new immigrants shaping what New York State is and what New York City is and what they both can be. So I want to thank Amanda Lugg so much for moderating, Theo for being with us, Lorena for being with us, and for shepherding Commissioner Castro on what I know is a very stressful day down at Port Authority where he is. So thank you all. We will certainly make the materials available. Happy at the Migrant Health Resource Hub to answer any questions. Ansley will put our website in the chat, and you will be hearing more about the Resource Hub during the course of the year as we are shaping it, with Amanda said, with our Community Advisory Board, a group of 10 organizations that serve migrants across the state. And hopefully we're trying to shape it into a powerful, user-friendly resource for migrant-serving organizations in New York City and state. So thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you at the next convening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.